steep slope logging operations. So this afternoon is kind of a follow-up about what he talked about this morning to show some of the additional details of the steep slope operation using some videos. So you're gonna see some actions on video. So enjoy the video and field trip. Now, what we're gonna do? Hunter has about 60 videos. It's a very small clip, sort of video clips, so running, but he is open to take any questions between videos. So if you do have a questions, feel free to ask any question. I'll remind you. I'll stop second before we get on to the next video. But feel free to. You don't have to wait until he show all the videos. And any question you come up while you are watching the video, he's available to answer the question. His video is total about less than 10 minutes altogether. But we do have a 30-minute time slot, so we have a lot of time. So feel free to jump in and ask a lot of questions. If possible, please write your questions in a Q&A box. Then the moderator, myself, and the other people can easily pick up the questions and make sure that question be answered. So with that, Hunter, turning it over to you.
Well, thank you, Han, and thank you, SWERI team. You've done a fantastic job today with, as Han said, very few technical issues. I hope we don't have any technical issues playing videos. I know videos can sometimes be a little bit glitchy in playback over Zoom, but we're going to do our best to bring those to you as smoothly as possible. So as Han said, we have plenty of time for discussion, so please do not hesitate to ask questions in between videos. What I'm going to do just to prompt us for the first video here before I ask Damon to play it is show you a picture of this operation. So the first operation we're going to see is this one in Austria on very steep slopes. And you can see in the picture here, it's a system that consists of a tethered John Deere harvester and a tethered John Deere forwarder working side by side on the same stand here. And so we will see in the video them operating on this exact hillside, and you will see video footage from the cab of the forwarder kind of in the leftmost corridor here. So in a good example again of how this cable assist or winch assist or tethered technology is expanding the capabilities or reach of our ground-based systems onto slightly steeper slopes. So maybe, up here around the ridge top, most of this harvest plan could have been harvested without the tether and with these machines normally. But, just this small corner where it does get steep, would maybe traditionally require cutting that piece out and saving it for a cable logging crew, which again has higher cost of operating for this particularly small, relatively small area. So with that said, let's take an up-close look from the cab of the forwarder of this operation. Damon, would you please play the first video clip? We will see 3 short video clips here from the forwarder. And just a reminder, make sure the sound is off because it can be loud. So Damon, would you go ahead and play the first video? So here's the machine. This is actually loaded coming downhill. And you can see this is very steep slope, again, around 70%. A lot of slash. Again, the advantage with cut to length system is we can do the processing of the stump and disperse this slash along the skid trail. So both machines try to utilize that very same skid trail. Here's another clip. You can see a little bit better of the machine going up here, up the hill unloaded. And you can see the harvester working over there off to the right at the same time. Notice we talked about techniques earlier. There's some high stumps you can see on there on the left, just to control logs from rolling down the hill, which is something you have to consider when you're using cut-to-length systems on these steeper slopes, is smaller logs do have a potential to roll a little bit easier, perhaps. One more clip of it here loading. This is interesting. You can see the video swings here with the cab. Some of these newer cut-to-length machines, the cab rotates simultaneously with the boom. Seems like a small change, but that's a huge improvement in terms of ergonomics, with the operator not having to twist their neck all day. You spend a lot of time in these machines on steep slopes, and that can make a huge difference in daily productivity. Also, you'll see when the machine was driving, again, these machines are articulated, so there's that articulation point in between the cab and the bunk here. So they twist and roll, which actually helps with, we'll stop there, Damon, and ask any questions. That helps with the stability on steep slopes. A rigid track machine, if you hit, that was very undulating terrain with a lot of obstacles and holes, and a rigid track machine would be at a little bit of risk of rolling there. I see there's some questions in the text.
So team, you want to ask any questions in live? So team, you want to, I think that you're on the panel, so you can turn on your video and ask any questions if we have.
Yeah, I don't have a particular question right now.
Okay.
I see there's a question there.
Another question from Lauren Kellogg. It says are these machines using integral synchronized winches or separate machine?
It's a good question, Lauren. These are the integral type. So both these machines have the winch mounted onto the felling machine or the forwarder itself. So they're the more integral type. And, like we talked about before, the difference is that rope is more or less static as the machine goes up and down the slope, because it's paying the rope out as it goes down, versus the other type where you have the separate machine at the top, which is always pulling or sliding the rope along the ground. That other type can be used with cut-to-length. Most of the cut-to-length systems have the integral type, but there are other options out there. So I think T-Winch is one company in Europe that makes a remote controlled small cabless, looks like a little bulldozer with a blade, but it's got a winch on it. So you can park that at the top of the slope and connect whatever machine of interest to it. So both styles of winch assist or cable assist systems can be used with cut-to-length machinery, but more commonly we see the integrated winch type.
Okay, great. The second question here in the chat box, I see what is the maximum slope that the tethered machine can work on?
That's the million-dollar question. I'm glad somebody brought that up. It really depends on a lot of things. Soil conditions, strength are paramount, of course. But that's a lot of people have that same question. And a lot of safety codes around the world that have come out recently about these machines point to the manufacturer's restrictions or limits, but actually very few. John Deere won't tell you how steep you can take their machinery. Comes down to kind of a liability issue. But we do know, these machines, various winch assist machines have operated over 100% slope, up to, I've heard, 110, 120% slope, over 45, 50 degrees, which is pretty extreme. And when you think about it, I've seen some researchers map different forest areas. There's not a whole lot of slopes that are actually that steep. It's very few if we consider the total forest area. So look, there's a lot of things that come into play in determining an appropriate slope limit. Certainly you should check the codes, both safety and operating codes in your area, and whatever advice you have from the manufacturer, but it does vary quite a bit.
Yeah, Hunter, so it's kind of a follow-up question on that. Yeah, I totally understand that the maximum slope the machine can walk on, that is depending on the soil conditions and a lot of other things. So, however, based on your experience, what are the typical steep slope they can they use the tethered machines?
Yeah, well, again, traditionally it's to access that stuff that's over 40%. So I see it being used a lot less than 40%. Again, it doesn't have to be used. This technology doesn't have to be used on extreme slopes because of that benefit of traction. I've seen it used on 20, 30% slope, but where maybe it's rained overnight and the soil conditions would just cause a lot of excessive tire track slip and rutting and disturbance. So some people are using it on less, but I would, if I had to guess, I would say I most see it commonly being used on slopes between about 50 and 70 to maybe 80%.
Okay.
But again, yeah, there's a whole range in there.
Yeah, I think that helps a lot to people understand about what are the typical situation, the tether machine is being used. That's great. So next question, I have another question came in here. It says that how long would it take an operator to become proficient at doing this kind of work?
Sorry, can you say that again? You just cut out there.
How long does it take for an operator to become proficient at doing the steep slope operation work?
Yeah, talking to operators in my experience, it's a different thing if they don't have any machine felling experience at all. If they do and they've got some experience operating on moderate slopes, then the transition can be relatively fast. Some operators told me it took them the better part of a year doing this regularly to get really comfortable and proficient at it.
Okay, great. Okay, next question I see here, it says that it is unclear to me when you made the comment about operator not having to turn his head. Does the whole seat pivot, or does the operations controlled from camera image on the video screen?
Yeah, let me just share that picture again with you because I think it shows clearly here. You can see the harvester here, and actually the whole cab rotates. So the whole cab is rotated 90 degrees to the left. So the whole cab rotates simultaneously with the boom. So that's pretty neat. The other thing I just wanted to point out, somewhat relating to the slope question, is, we're really pushing the limits with slope limits with machines today. I think Lauren said it best this morning. The old tracked bulldozers that we used of yesterday are not the same as the machines we use today. And I have a picture here that shows several pictures of a lot of the undercarriage developments that have happened over time that are allowing machines, even without a winch, to climb on steeper or more undulating terrain. So you can see some examples here, again, with the bogie axles where one tire can lift a couple feet off the ground while the other tire remains stable. The picture over here on the far right where you can see actually the tires on the right hand side are lower than the tires on the left hand side, so they can travel side hill easier. And even our more rigid tracks, the machine in the top left here has tracks that can pivot on one another. So one track pivots, one track remains rigid, but that helps with uneven or undulating terrain. So just important to note that there's been a lot of undercarriage developments that have really helped machines, even without these winches, climb steeper slopes.
Excellent. Excellent. There's one comment from came in here. Great opportunities with training using simulators for tethered assist operation.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I'd love to see some steep slopes in those simulators. I had a John Deere simulator and the simulator developer came over and we built our own terrain that was 40% and they couldn't believe we were using it in the simulator to try to fell trees. They said that was the steepest they'd ever seen.
okay.
But certainly a great tool, simulators.
All right. So you got a lot of questions coming in here more. So I have a few more here. How
Okay, we'll
much?
take a few more, yeah.
Yeah, so sounds good. Question says, how much extra traction do the metal the track bands give versus running the bogies without bands?
That's a great question, and I don't know the exact answer, but if we assume, in basic engineering calculations, we have to assume a coefficient of friction, and generally when you add tracks, you're adding about a point. It's about 0.4 to 6 would be 0.4 to 0.6, I believe, would be the coefficient of traction for wheeled machines on soil, but that could go up to more like 0.6 to 0.7 or higher with tracks. So look, I don't have a direct answer for you. And again, there's a lot of factors involved with the soil and the slope.
Okay. You mentioned about the winching in your sister's at the tether operation. What is the length of the wire rope on winch?
Yeah, that's something that's important for planning in terms of how far these trails can be and how far you can reach for primary transportation. It depends on manufacturer, but typically between 1,000 to 2,000 feet. So 300 meters would be 300 to 500 meters is typical. A lot of them are getting longer.
Okay, great. Next question. Okay, you want to show the video, or there are several about four more questions.
Yeah, we'll take maybe one more and then we'll show another video clip, and if there's more time at the end, we'll get to them.
Okay, so the question says, hi Hunter, we see a lot of working from top of the unit to the bottom. Have you seen any operations where the road is at the bottom and the equipment walking up the hill? Cable capacity is probably an issue.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I think it's actually a great transition to our next video clip. So I want to show an example of that. So maybe Damon, I think it's the Falcon uphill video, if you would play that, please.
Sure, and I just want to check in, Hunter, did those come through all right with no audio that I played before?
They did for me, and I hope they did for the audience as well. So here you can see this is a unit where they did have to work from the bottom up. So they didn't have a road at the top, but they still wanted to use a winch assist machine. So that was the winch machine parked at the bottom. There's a couple pulleys or blocks set on stumps. So the rope is kind of like a big N shape, I guess, up through the stand and then back down to the felling machine. So this is a tracked feller buncher with a directional felling head. So you can see they also have that chain on the end of the rope. That's so they don't damage the rope when they pick it up with the grapple to lift it over stumps and things like that. There's the winch machine working at the bottom of the hill. So that was of particular interest to the Canadian market. I know in British Columbia, they traditionally don't have a lot of roads at the tops of hills. So they wondered how they would actually employ these machines. And so they showed an example of it there. Certainly, as the question pointed out, there would be, maybe take your corridor length and cut it in half because you've got to go up the hill and then come back down with the rope. Either way, you've got to set that up and put those blocks in place, and that can be challenging on steep slopes. The advantage of some of the integrated winch winches that are mounted on the machines, like we saw in the previous video, are you can connect that rope to a tree or a stump at the top of the hill. So you don't need a machine or a road at the top of the hill, but you've still got to find some way to get that cable up the hill, and pulling it up by hand could be a bit challenging. Luckily, they're usually smaller size ropes on those types of machines. Those European ones have slightly smaller ropes, and people use tools like chainsaw winches to help winch the cable up the hill to get it anchored onto the stump or tree. But yeah, happy to answer any other questions about that application there, or in general about those winch assist machines.
So, yeah, I have about 3 questions here lined up. It says the one actually comment from the about your answers about maximum about 80%. So he says, so based on our experience, I would agree that up to 80% slope is a good number to use for most operations. Over 80% really impacts on productivity, and you need to have a really good condition for this to work. This is for a tethered cut length operation, the audience says.
Yeah, I agree with those comments, Han. And again, back to the slide I had in the presentation, my conclusion was, with this technology, that upper limit of steep slopes that we're talking about, getting towards that 80% or higher, is possible, but you have to have those 3 things. You have to have that experienced operator, and you've got to have those good soil conditions, and that purpose-built machine to do it. And that may include having, some of these more advanced undercarriage designs in the felling machine or whatever machine's traversing the hillside.
Next question says, is there any pros and cons of mastication of the slash on steep slope using tethered machine after logging?
Yeah, well, to reduce fire risks after logging, generally, if this machine's used, and hopefully we'll see in some upcoming videos here, there's very little slash left, especially if we're doing pull tree methods. And part of that is there's very little breakage on steep slopes with mechanized tethered felling. Also the other advantages in terms of the slash left over, so we don't have that much left behind, basically left over afterwards. But in terms of using a masticator to treat fuel loading in restoration areas or other projects like that, I think there's a huge potential. It will come at a very high cost. Masticating alone, I think, is already expensive enough, and then you're adding this technology to it would certainly increase the cost. But in terms of the possibility, and I think that's been tried up in Oregon too. People have successfully done that. Perfect.
So we have about about 5-6 minutes left. So we want to make sure you watch all the video.
Let's skip to the next video real quickly, and then we can save some questions for the end.
Okay.
Right.
Should I queue up the tower yarder one, Hunter?
Yeah, go ahead and go to one of the tower yarder ones. We'll just go to the 2 tower yarders. Okay, so here you can see, again, this is a plantation forest in New Zealand, but they felled all this area using that machine. In this case, it's not even tethered at this point. They didn't think it was steep enough, I guess, to use the winch, but it is pretty darn steep. But again, that self-leveling undercarriage and newer design of some of these feller bunchers is really advantageous here. But again, you can see that they're bunching trees, and they look so nice and neat, like they're combed. So they're arranging these. That operator has in the cab the tablet. He knows the skyline will be right in this position, and they're trying to line all the butt ends of those trees kind of in a herringbone pattern, I guess you would call it, towards the yarder. Another interesting feature, this is not like the harvesting head you saw in the last one. This is a fixed type harvesting head. So he has full control there. You see them pick up and rotate and swing the tree around. The other type of head you saw in the last video is just a directional felling head, and it will just flop over as soon as you cut the tree. So that actually slows the fall of the tree and contributes to less breakage with that type of head they're finding with this crew. This crew has one of their older tower yarders. It's a TMY 70 for those of you familiar. And they've got one of those new motorized grapple carriages. So 2 ropes here, skyline, mayline. They're shotgunning the carriage down. They lower the skyline down to the ground. They're able to pick up these pre-bunched stems and usually, as you can see, get more than 1 tree in each grapple load, which is great. You can see the operator has a screen there so they can see the camera feed. And that small leftmost screen that's vertically oriented, that's actually that tension monitoring app I showed you a picture of in the presentation earlier. So they've got the tension monitor, they've got the video feed from the camera. Here's the view of the video inside the carriage. So that's what the operator sees on that. I think it's a 27-inch LCD screen in the cab of the machine. Damon, maybe if you could cut to the next video of the other swing yarder that's operating. I think that's a pretty good idea for everybody there of how those 2 pieces of technology can be used together. This is actually the same crew. They own 2 logging crews, 2 cable logging crews, but they share that felling machine between the 2 crews. So you'll see the same machine here, only it's tethered in this instance because they required it on this slope. So you can see here, we were talking about bending the tree. We can see trees laid out here and they kind of converge like an A towards the top here. So this is where an operator would have bent around a tree and come down this slope. And successfully bent around different trees to kind of fan out their track pattern, I guess you could say, going down the hill without having to relocate the winch at the top. So somewhere up the ropes here, they bend around a tree. You can see where they came straight down the hill earlier in the background here. So Brett mentioned something 45 degrees was the limit of bending around a tree in Oregon, and we'll probably be pretty close to that here. There they are picking up the chains, you could see with the grapple head to try to pop it over a stump or some brush there.
Wow, this is very interesting. Hunter, I even though I'm after lunch, I never get the bored and not sleepy. I'm excited to see all this video in action. So I appreciate that information. I just want to let you know there are some more questions in the Q&A box. It's asking about some actually the cost numbers, and
Yeah.
there's another question related to about lateral reach of the boom in the cut length operation. So there are some other questions we may not be able to answer because of the time limit, but I'd like to hand over to the next presentation, the next field trip. So I'm going to let over to the team to explain some of the interesting field trip. So Hunter, thank you so much for your presentation. That was a very exciting and very interesting. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Han, and I'll try to answer some of those questions for people in the text box.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Han. Our next field trip, virtually speaking, of course, will be, we'll take you to just outside Gunnison, Colorado, which is kind of south central for those of you that may not be aware. And we're going to kind of give you a sense of a pretty collaborative project that was driven by one of our common forest health concerns in Colorado with the mountain pine beetle. So I think I'm going to ask Damon to go ahead and invite all of our representatives for this particular field tour. And I think the video itself is just roughly 10 minutes, so we have some time. So I think what I'm going to do is introduce, we have 4 representatives from this project. It's called the Wilder-Highlands Mountain Pine Beetle Response. And so we've got Sam Pankratz, Marcus Selig. I don't know if Shawn will be with us for this video. He's the contractor, the logger that completed the work. And then we have Matt McCombs with the U.S. Forest Service. So kind of if we want to maybe visualize it, where, you know, we've all carpooled, so to speak, and gotten to the project location where we're going to take our field tour. Maybe just treat this, we're all out of our cars, and I'm going to ask each of our representatives for this project to give a little introduction, particularly about the role that they played with their corresponding organizations, maybe highlight some particular aspects of what we'll see in the accompanying video, and then we'll have Damon cue the video up and we'll take a look. So why don't we start by letting Sam introduce himself.
Hey, good morning. Thanks, Tim. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good deal. Yeah, my name is Sam Pankratz. I'm a supervisory forester with the Colorado State Forest Service here in the Gunnison field office. And, you know, I don't want to steal too much of the video's thunder. So, because there is a pretty good, Mr. McCombs gives a pretty good overview of really kind of the purpose and need and how this project went rolling. But, you know, primarily our role in the project was really helping to, I guess, add some capacity to our U.S. Forest Service partners to leverage our relationships. You know, here in Colorado with the State Forest Service, you know, we're primarily focused on working with private landowners, and so, you know, leveraging our existing relationships with the Wilder-on-the-Taylor and the Wilder-Highlands communities, which you'll hear more about in the video. And, you know, as we kind of move through the planning pieces of this, you know, really our role was focused on kind of the on-the-ground implementation piece, you know, the project layout and design, and then working with Shawn and CRS as the project got rolling in terms of doing the contract administration and meeting with those homeowners and landowners. As you'll see, it was a pretty heavy cross-boundary relationship. So yeah, I think I'll leave it at that and maybe pass it over to Matt over there. Is that okay, Tim? Am I stealing your role?
No, go ahead. Absolutely. Matt, go ahead. Thanks.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Tim. And everyone that's joining in this fantastic gathering of a lot of like-minded folks. So I'm Matt McCombs, the district ranger for the Gunnison Ranger District on the Grand Mesa, Uncompahgre, and Gunnison National Forest. And my role was as the deciding official and line officer for the district. And you'll kind of, again, the story sort of tells itself, and we're all super proud of how we were able to work together and move out in a way that I think mirrors and is a fantastic representation of how shared stewardship, this idea of working together, bringing all the unique tools, skills, experiences, relationships that all the distinct organizations that are interested in the business of caring for the nation's forests, both private and public, can come together and get stuff done in a way that's meaningful and reflective of tearing down boundaries and maximizing all the different tools and talents that each organization and individual can bring. So I hope you enjoy the video, and I'll pass it back to Tim, and then he can decide who gets to go next.
All right. Let's go with Shawn. You know, welcome, Shawn. I appreciate, in particular, you know, from the for-profit side of things, your participation in helping host this little virtual field tour. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your role, Shawn. Oh, you're muted, Shawn.
There we
There
go.
you go.
Yeah, sorry. I don't get around computers much. No, good afternoon. Yeah, I was the contractor on the job. My name's Shawn. And, this was a fun little project for us. We've expanded to where we can be a little more flexible than what we used to be in the past and just commercial logging. And this was a great opportunity to do something we really enjoy doing, and that's being proactive on forest health. And really enjoyed doing this project with the NFF and the State Forest Service. And it was a unique challenge, something we're not used to, but I think it went well and look forward to hopefully doing more in the future.
All right. Thanks, Shawn. And finally, Marcus Selig. He was a big part of establishing this project and putting some of the pieces together through the National Forest Foundation. Critical role in a lot of different projects in Colorado.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Marcus Selig, I'm Vice President in National Forest Foundation and oversee our on-the-ground operations across the National Forest System, and based just over the hill from this project in Salida, Colorado. So this has been a fun one to watch and be involved with so close to home. So NFF's role as the nonprofit partner of the U.S. Forest Service in this effort was to help kind of orchestrate the pieces from an agreements and contract standpoint and from a funding standpoint. So NFF helped bring and aggregate funding for the overall effort. And then we also helped with the contract and grant development and agreement development for this project. So we set up an agreement with the GMUG National Forest to make sure that everything was in line there. And then got the grants out to Colorado State Forest Service so that Sam could play that great on the ground role, and contracted with Shawn and his outfit to get the on the ground work going. And really, the benefit added through that is that we're really designed to do just that. And we can do it pretty quick, pretty nimble, and make a project like this that had to move quickly and get it done. And you'll hear about the turnaround time on this project from planning to implementation. But I think that was our strength in that, was helping get those agreements in place and turned around quickly so we can make it happen. So appreciate the opportunity to showcase this project. Thanks.
All right, thank you, guys. Like I say, the video itself is a little shy of 10 minutes, I believe. And then we'll bring all these guys back to provide some post-tour perspective and address the questions that come into the question box. So Damon, I think you have the video queued up and we'll be presenting.
The story of the Wilder Project is really a story of everything working. In the fall of 2019, our Forest Health Protection Unit in the National Forest identified an outbreak of mountain pine beetle. And, mountain pine beetle is a natural part of the ecosystem. They are endemic to the forests all over the state of Colorado and across the Intermountain West, and they serve a natural role. But when they get to that epidemic or outbreak level, they can become a very impactful species. And we have a incredibly large population of lodgepole pine here in the Taylor Basin that is really the last of the unaffected lodgepole forests in the state of Colorado. Many folks if you're from Colorado or you visit Colorado frequently, have experienced the mass mortality events on the I-70 corridor and Highway 40 going up towards Steamboat. And we're set up for a very similar experience if this outbreak went unchecked. And so as soon as the district found this out last fall, we immediately began planning to respond as rapidly as we can. But the uniqueness of this project is that beetles don't know boundaries.
The beetle is spreading so quickly because, first of all, we have these large, mature, overcrowded pine forests that haven't had a lot of forest management. And so basically They are all the same forest type. They're all the same height. Most of them are the same diameter. They all grew up together. And for a bark beetle, that's like this beautiful buffet because, you know, if you had aspen and Doug fir and spruce intermixed in there, plus different age classes, then it makes it a lot harder for that bark beetle to get around and find the right hosts. When you just have this contiguous forest and everything's the same, then those bark beetle populations are able to just exponentially grow.
And so we knew that we were going to have to work with the communities that are our neighbors right here in the Taylor Canyon in a way that was going to allow us to be as effective as possible and beat the beetles back to the extent that we possibly could. And so we started really 3 conversations almost simultaneously. One was we knew that we weren't going to be able to move as rapidly as we wanted to using the conventional ways that we put contracts together and acquire services in the Forest Service. So we started dialogue with our friends from the National Forest Foundation.
The unique role that the NFF is able to play as a nonprofit organization, we have a lot of flexibility and nimbleness to able to support our partners at the federal and state level. We're also bringing a unique skill set and having project development, administration, budgeting, fundraising, and all of that has really played a critical role in this project to get us to where we are out here running saws, slowing the spread of this beetle.
The second partner that we reach out to is the Colorado State Forest Service.
And in this project, we've been doing a lot of the actual project layout and design, GPSing and timber cruising and making maps. And now we're really heavily focused on doing the project administration. So working day in and day out with the contractor on the ground, with the individual homeowners out here in the communities, the log truck drivers, and making sure that we do everything that we said we were going to do.
Once we figured out what the extent of the outbreak was and where the affected lands were, we started talking to our neighbors. And that includes the Wilder on the Taylor community as well as the Wilder-Highlands community. Each one of those communities had private landowners within them that had affected stands.
You know, as a homeowner, we were really excited to be a partner in this project. The mountain pine beetle is something that none of us really understand, and it can be really a scary process when you're talking about coming in and logging and taking down trees, etc. The way that our homeowners looked at it is, this is a safety aspect, but it's also a preservation project. And all we're here to do is just do our part.
With some really frank conversations and some incredible openness from our adjacent neighbors, we were able to move forward. And that's why there's a helicopter in the air today.
Shawn Cheeseman, I'm with CRS Timber Product. We're here today doing some emergency mitigation work on some mountain pine beetle. So we're trying to do just a thinning and try to get all of the infected trees off the stand as possible. We're sitting on a large pocket of undisturbed lodgepole pine in this state. It's one of the last large stands of healthy lodgepole pine, and we're hopes of trying to stay ahead of the beetle problem so we don't lose our last green slopes. We're using the helicopter today to try to get to all that steep ground, try not to have the ground disturbance of ground-based activity. It's working pretty good today. We're trying to get about 450 trees off this 78-acre piece in hopes of trying to get this mitigated for this year and knock it down so maybe next year we can get it buttoned up. Here you are. You know, this is high intensity, high speed logging right here, 101. This is actually a pretty good landing location compared to some of the ones we do, but hey, it's a proper tool for the job. We're hoping it'll take off and it'll work. And so it's all about the future of our forest. We're losing so much right now. We've lost so many species already in the pine beetle and the spruce beetle, the fir beetle, the budworm. You know, it's anything we can do right now to save what we got left is the most important thing. And projects like this, we hope make a difference. You know, all we can do is try. It's better than throwing your hands up and giving up on it and saying, just let it do its thing.
All right, thanks, Damon, for queuing up the tour. Just looking at this one's probably for Shawn, and a question about, is he really listening to death metal in the background? Take it away, Shawn, if you want to.
Well, unfortunately, in that circumstance, all I could hear was a helicopter. But no, if I was in the loader at that time, yes, I would have been.
Yeah. Couple other comments in the chat. Great presentation, things of that nature. I'm not seeing. Okay, question. What is happening to the material that's that was removed or being removed from these projects?
Everything off the Wilder project went to Montrose Forest Products for stud production. For stud production, excuse me.
Yeah, we did, just to add to that, we did have a fair bit of, non-saw timber coming off the project that came off in the form of firewood, and certainly with a project where you're dealing with mountain pine beetle, we had to have take some kind of extra precautionary measures to make sure firewood was going to safe places, away from available other host trees and pine species. And then, as was kind of mentioned in the video too, we had to sort of work, we had a heavy push, what we called phase one prior to the mountain pine beetle flight, which starts roughly here around July 1st, and then moved our second phase out to really when they're done flying in late summer and early fall to kind of work around those windows, which You know, we were already on one side of the window. We were up against, you know, Gunnison sage grouse restrictions in the spring. So we weren't even, you know, weren't allowed to operate until May 15th. And then we had some big game over winter range restrictions starting December 1st. So within that tight window, we made ourselves even smaller windows to work in.
How much of the project were how much of it characterized as steep slopes requiring the heli logging? Was there any ground-based work? What types of systems may have been used for those areas?
Shawn, do you want to take that one?
Sure. If you saw in the video, I use a traditional track feller buncher and grapple skidding and processing and landing, poultry production. We did primarily ground-based on the first, I guess only about a third of it acreage-wise would be considered ground-based on the first phase. Although production-wise, we did far more ground-based than we did under the helicopter. And then in phase 2, we did all ground-based.
Another question kind of gets at the funding. They're asking if it was Forest Service appropriated funds that were used for this project.
Yeah, I can take that. So yeah, some of the funding was indeed Forest Service funding moved to NFF through. I think this one was a participating agreement. But there were also additional non-federal funds that were brought into the project that NFF helped raise from various sources. And moving forward too, we're looking at having a much heavier mix of non-federal sources. But yeah, it was a mix of different funding sources, but definitely some federal appropriated in there. And Tim, just one other thing to add to we talked to the private land component was mentioned in there, but I think it's just worth explaining too the efficiencies in that process. So NFF did work with each individual landowner to get right of entry and work with them to make sure that they were happy with the way we were going to do the treatments and what was planned there on their land. But then we were able to let one agreement with Shawn and his outfit to get in there and treat across boundary, is instead of having to do separate agreements for each individual parcel, which just made it much more efficient from a cost standpoint and operation standpoint. Just wanted to point that out too.
All right, thanks, Marcus. And then another cost-related question for Shawn, maybe, or all of you can weigh in. They're asking for the per acre cost for the helicopter aspects of this project.
Well, on this project, because we were looking at 78 acres and we were only pulling out about 410 pre-limb trees, it was not a lot of tonnage. Phase 2, we're going to be looking at harvesting in the woods, processing in the woods mechanically, but we're also looking at quite a bit more volume per acre. So I think we were looking at costs around $2,500 an acre off this last go around. And I think it's going to be closer to $3,200 or $3,400 an acre the next go around, just because based on how many tons per acre we have to fly.
Yeah, and just to add on top of that, you know, the video that you're looking at, that particular hillside where the helicopter was working there was, you know, a vast majority of the mature, you know, potential host trees were either already killed or the stuff that Shawn was taking off with the helicopter. And as we moved into other areas, you know, we really were looking at a silviculture prescription of overstory removal in that lodgepole pine. And so, you know, one of the neat things about this project is, you know, early on in the planning stages there, we developed a silvicultural matrix, which really allowed us to look at a lot of different options for implementation based on slope, based on average DBH or basal area per acre, and based on current levels of infestation. So we kind of had this cool menu to work with, and that, you know, and I guess I say that because, you know, I think there's a lot of concern over like just going after infested trees, right? And, you know, how long can you play that game and just pluck away infested trees? So, you know, we really opted to do that just on that one hillside where, you know, it was super steep, really high cost per acre, but a fair number of infested trees in there that, you know, we looked at as being a net benefit to the project. And then as we moved into the ground-based country there, we were able to be a little more aggressive with some overstory removal prescriptions.
All right. Okay, we have another question. This is from a colleague of Sam and mine. What type of NEPA process did this project have to go through? You know, 4 months is pretty unusual to get those types of approvals in place. So they're asking about any obstacles from that perspective.
Sure, so I'll speak to that. You know, there's just recently our entomologist that's based here on the Gunnison Ranger District as part of our state and private forestry forest health protection unit, you know, came breathlessly into a staff meeting in like August and said, "They're here, the beetles are here." And that really, you know, that was, Amy was featured in the video there, and she's also a recent recipient of a national award for excellence in forest management for her work. And really it was from that moment that we immediately started thinking about how we were going to be able to move forward, and planning, you know, environmental analysis is a key component of that. And so the tool that was available to us was the Farm Bill CE that deals specifically with insect and disease, you know, and has an acreage cap that was perfectly applicable to the area that we were analyzing, and was really a ready-made tool to address this specific type of issue. And moving as rapidly as we wanted to required us to immediately engage in very candid dialogue with environmental partners, with the landowners themselves, with other folks that might be a little skeptical about moving that quickly. And luckily, we had been working in a very successful collaborative environment prior to this with 2 different adaptive management groups. One kind of focused more in the Gunnison County, Gunnison Basin area, the Taylor AMG Adaptive Management Group. And then as part of a larger forest-wide planning effort to deal with spruce beetle and aspen decline, we had another adaptive management group that was composed of scientists, stakeholders, and a variety of other entities. So, you know, that video is titled "The Story of Everything Working," and this is just another ingredient of that story, where we had this ready-made collaborative entity where trust had been built, you know, best available science had been discussed in very hard truth setting conversations, and so we had built enough trust and enough willingness in the hearts of the community that they were willing to move into a trust but verify status and let us move forward rapidly. And this storytelling that we did with this video was sort of part of that response to that we told them that we were in, and Sam talks about it in the video, that you know, we were going to do what we said we were going to do and nothing more, and then adapt as conditions change. And that's really what we've been holding to since the beginning. But this is a perfect example of where those unique tools, those categorical exclusions that are either been defined by the agency or legislation, can come in and be the perfect recipe for moving forward rapidly and earnestly and in a targeted fashion.
Okay, I think we're gonna hold it there. I think we've programmed a break till 2:45. Damon, you may want to come in if there are any housekeeping details, but just want to thank Sam, Matt, Shawn, of course, and Marcus for representing this project. It was very timely when we were putting together topical virtual field tours for this webinar. So great job, you guys. Excellent work. Thanks again.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all. It's been a great conference.
Yeah, thank you.
And nothing really to add on my end. We'll take a 15-minute break and reconvene at 2:45 for video section with Sarah Smith from Katera. So see y'all then.